Good day, everybody. My name is Glenn Stafford with Statler Atlas AI. I have the pleasure today of having Noel Wilson, a industry leader with his company that does great stuff called Intelligenic. And I'm going to let Noel start off with talking about what his background has been and what led him to the formation of Intelligenic. To you, Noel.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. Excited to
Our
talk to
pleasure.
you. Yeah, excited to talk to you a little bit about Intelligenic. At Intelligenic, we are offering an AI-driven platform that automates all aspects of the software development process from beginning to end. We do that by gathering the necessary context regarding the application and the organization that you're part of. We provide that to our agentic framework, and by virtue of doing so, it's able to generate production-ready code with minimal iterations. So we're effectively enabling vibe coding for enterprise scale organizations building very complex applications.
Okay. And how do you see AI play into the role of automating the software development lifecycle?
It's incredibly important, and it's very prevalent today. In fact, most organizations are trying to do it in some fashion. You hear about platforms like Lovable, like Replit, like Claude Code. It's part of the toolbox that engineering teams are using. But the reality is that most large-scale organizations really struggle to get the benefits that they've been promised. We're talking about it being this force multiplier, which I am absolutely a believer of, and I believe that it can happen, but most organizations are unable to get it. In fact, most organizations only see about 10 to 20% productivity gains and cost savings as a result.
Okay,
The
we'll get to
reason for
force. Oh,
this,
go ahead, continue.
yeah, I was going to say, so the reason for this is that it requires a tremendous amount of expertise to be able to just write software without using artificial intelligence. When you introduce artificial intelligence to the process, you need that same expertise in being able to create the software, but you also need additional expertise to understand what instructions to provide to that model, that agentic framework, to ensure that it produces something of quality. We call those the prompts. And you also need to understand that you need to provide the appropriate context regarding what should be built, why it should be built, and how it should be built. Think of it this way. If you're writing software without artificial intelligence, you're never going to tell your engineering team that, I'm a bank and I want my banking software to integrate with Bank of America. You might start there, but if that's all you told them, it's a very unlikely situation that you'll get what you want from that. But conversely, if you give them a lot of information about the specifications, how Bank of America will open up its APIs, connect with yours, what sort of functionality that you want to be able to provide for the end user, the more details that you start to provide to the humans, the more accurate the information is that they'll be able to use to be able to create the code. It's the same thing with the large language models and the agentic frameworks. Just treat it just like it's a human. It just happens to be a digital human. The more information you provide, the better output that you receive.
Sounds good. This leads to we're going to get back to the context. However, I'm sure you have some excellent remarks to make for our viewership about the inefficiencies that exist today with traditional development versus getting on the bandwagon and using AI.
Yeah, for sure. So if you just setting aside for a moment this all these amazing artificial intelligence tools that are at our disposal, um, there have been problems since the history of software development. Um, First and foremost, we've never had enough qualified people to meet the demand for all the software that we're being asked to build. Quite frankly, that hasn't changed with the introduction of artificial intelligence. As I mentioned before, you need a high level of expertise to be able to understand how to use the models, what sort of context to provide to ensure that the quality of what's being produced meets your expectations and it's relevant. And that's always been the case historically. We've never had enough qualified people to meet that demand. When we have had people, it's still been a highly manual process, which leads to an incredibly large amount of effort, long delivery times, and high costs. Well, that's still the case today. Because even with the introduction of artificial intelligence, just because you're telling it to do something doesn't mean it's going to produce the right thing the first time. Most of the time it doesn't, and you're having to iterate again and again and again. I could share a litany of stories where organizations have tried it and it just is adding more complexity to what they do. If you already have a complex situation in your own software development process, expecting to introduce technology without a plan and without a team that understands how to use it is just going to exacerbate the complexity that you already have.
Okay. So, with context, I'd be kind of curious if I can phrase this correctly. Why is context and structured workflows so critical in AI coding?
Uh, it's you can't build it without it. So if you were to just try to simply enter in a simple prompt without any context regarding your application, you'll get something for sure. It's going to guess. And then what's happening today is that people are trying to create this new way of doing it with completely disregarding the context and the structure. And so they iterate again and again and give it more information as they go. But what they're not realizing is that they're doing what they should have done from the beginning, which is to define that structure, that context. And had they done that up front, they wouldn't have to spend all of the time continuing to get the model to iterate again and again and again. Now, this has a cost associated with it. What typically happens when people are using artificial intelligence today, they're creating what we call as tech debt. It's code that's not used, right? It's a lot of stuff that the model will throw in there because it's guessing what it needs to provide to solve the problem that you've given it, assuming you haven't given it the right sort of context and structure, so it doesn't need to do that. But inevitably it does. Once you have this tech debt, you have a choice. You could either just leave it as is and try to deal with it and hope that it's not going to cause problems with your software as you progress. Okay. If you do that, it still consumes resources, space on the hard drive, compute cycles to be able to understand what it needs to deal with that. And then if you multiply that by 1,000, by 1,000,000, because all these other organizations are doing the same thing. Think about what that does on a macro scale worldwide. That's going to increase the need for more data centers, more computers to be able to deal with these applications that you've created. All of those things operate on resources that we don't have a whole lot of: power, water. And so it creates a pretty significant problem. The problem that gets highlighted a lot in the media today is that, well, it's going to be this detrimental threat, to humanity. It's going to destroy jobs and everything. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. We're going to need more people to be able to finally fulfill the demand for all these applications that we'll be able to build. The real problem exists in dealing with the compute needs, the underlying power to support that, and the water to cool all of these devices that are operating. Those are the problems that we really need to be solving for to be able to meet the true demand for all the software that we're going to be able to create. It's going to solve all these problems that we've never been able to address ever. Now we suddenly have the technology available to us to make that happen.
Appreciate that response. It's pretty good. Now, from your experiences in working with the AI, how has it dramatically increased your productivity?
Oh, for us, it's been a game changer. Like we're one of the few organizations that's actually seeing force multiplication in doing that. So all of our engineers use agents. We use some of what we're building as well. So we're absolutely living and breathing and embracing that, as well as other technologies to just enhance our ability to produce more code more rapidly. But we're adhering to everything that I've been talking about. We're providing it the structure. We're providing it the guidance. We're providing it the context. We do that first before we even start asking it to produce the outputs that we're looking for. And then as a result, we take all of our learnings in creating our own product, and that becomes part of our core proprietary software development lifecycle information that we offer to all of our end users that will use Product Studio when they sign in. So not only are they able to gain access to this agentic framework to create all the software for them, but they get our best practices, our guidance on how to create software for their particular workflow. That combined with the context that they provide through their inputs, describing what they want to build, why they want to build it, their organization, produces an incredibly high level of quality in the output that our framework can produce for them. And it also reduces the iterations that they might normally have to go through to produce working software.
So the name of the project again is Product Studio.
Product Studio, that's correct.
So with Product Studio, we have a lot of force multiplication or force multipliers involved in this. And how did you get to that point where it's as productive as it is now?
Well, there's a lot of engineering that went into creating the framework, right? So we've created a framework that uses multiple large language models in concert to perform specific tasks that need to inevitably get created every time that you're creating software. Starting with, we have one that will focus on producing product requirements definitions. We have one that focuses on creating user workflows. We have one that focuses on what is the product and all the features associated with that, and then what are the actual user stories themselves. Um, that's not a trivial effort just to create a framework that uses all of these things and knows when it needs to use it. We've also created a graph reg framework that creates semantic links between all the pieces of information that the end user provides and the information that we're providing on the best practices and guidance and everything that we produce in the form of work products, right? That creates this thing. It's a concept that we call the context mesh, right? That's all the necessary context that you need to be able to produce a quality output. So that combined with our agentic framework that can analyze that context and determine when to use it for the most appropriate output that it's trying to generate, whether that's a PRD, whether that is a high fidelity user screen, like an actual screen that you'd see in your application, or the code itself. That requires a lot of engineering effort to create a framework that does all of that. Plus, it requires a lot of expertise to create that initial context regarding the SDLC, the software development lifecycle best practices that we bring to bear to offer that to our end users. And we've worked with literally thousands of people that have been interested in the Intelligenic journey and the products that we're creating to refine that and fine tune it, share early versions of our product with them and take that input from them so that we can then turn it into something that will be usable for not only them, but everybody else that might be interested and
Okay.
involved in the software development process and creating software worldwide.
Now, does Studio Product create a pseudo language, or is there actually a computing language that it targets to be able to have these applications running?
It's going to be the best programming language for what you're trying to create, really. So it's not
So
limited.
there, so it's not like we're using C code or COBOL code. It uses its own language
No, I mean
to handle.
it uses, it uses JavaScript when it needs to, it uses Python when it needs
Okay,
to, it uses if there's a use case for it, it would use C and C++. It just depends on
okay,
the
gotcha.
use case that you're trying to address. If you have a legacy application that utilizes that and you're not prepared to make a transition to more modern software development programming languages, it would create the necessary components for you. It has the ability to integrate with your code repo, if that's GitHub, whatever, analyze what you've produced already, and then make a determination on how to enhance that based on the information that you provide, that context that you provide. And then based on that analysis, it will recommend, unless you tell it otherwise, the most appropriate development language to use to create the solution.
Now, with Studio Product, what has been your biggest wins this year?
We've been working with the United States government, specifically the Air Force, to explore how we can use Product Studio to help them with their software development initiatives. You can imagine the Air Force uses lots of software to manage aircraft and to actually go within the aircraft itself and manage their organization. And they have the same challenges that every other organization on the planet has. It's a really inefficient process. Most organizations are looking for ways to use artificial intelligence to improve that process, and we've demonstrated that we can enhance their ability to define the products that they want to create and then get to the point where they can seamlessly start to generate the necessary code to continue to enhance applications or to create new applications altogether.
Now I'm going to use something based upon my years' experience. I had a great boss to work for. She said, I don't know what you do. I only know how to spell systems administrator. And she gave me some interesting marching orders. She was one of my best boss. However, what do you say to someone who says, I only know how to spell artificial intelligence? How do I get up to speed?
Start using it. It's everywhere. Quite frankly, I would say that even though you might not know how to spell artificial intelligence, or maybe you do, if you have like an iPhone, you're using it. It's just so seamless. You don't even recognize that it's in there. It's embedded within the iOS. And so like when you're trying to figure out how best to take advantage of your iPhone, you're getting access to artificial intelligence. When you do a Google search, Gemini's right there to answer questions for you. It's these days it is almost impossible to avoid it if you use any sort of technology. So I would just say that start using it. And then in the cases where you're using something like Google and Gemini, that's probably the easiest way to learn about it because then you just start asking questions about it. It's like, tell me, how does this work? Like what's actually happening behind the scenes, and it'll start to inform you in that. There's so many assets at our fingertips that are available to inform us on what artificial intelligence is and how to use it, right? I would say that if you're not taking the steps to learn how to use it and incorporate it into everything that you do, whether that's just in your personal life or in your business life, you are putting yourself at a significant disadvantage because most people on the planet are using it in some fashion, and it just behooves you to take advantage of this incredible asset. I mean, it'll improve more than just software development. It'll improve really any kind of workflow, whether that's, your business development workflows and go to market, whether that's how you manage your finances in your books as a business. I mean, there's so many different ways that it could be applied to just improve the way that we operate. Think of it as just another tool that just makes you more proficient at what you do. All the things that you wanted to be able to do, but you never have the time to do it because you're so focused on the day-to-day activities, you can get artificial intelligence to do that, and then you can start thinking about these things that are more complex, harder for artificial intelligence to help you with. That's the exciting part about this. It frees humans up to do the things that we've been wanting to do, but we haven't been able to do it because we're stuck in the tedium of the normal process of whatever workflow it is that we're responsible for.
Now, are you familiar with the names Ross Overbeek and Larry Wozniak?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. I had the pleasure of scheduling them for presentations. Ross Overbeek was the big artificial intelligence man. Larry Wozniak was artificial reasoning. And the way it came across is Larry Wozniak once made the statement, the problem with artificial intelligence, it's this or that, black or white. Artificial reasoning takes a look at weight factors and makes it work. So is today's artificial intelligence geared more towards artificial reasoning than the former true definition of artificial intelligence?
Getting better. We haven't really achieved through artificial intelligence. More than anything, it's a great probability analyzer. That's the best way to think about it. Um, but it has access to a tremendous amount of information to help it. determine what's the highest probability of how it should respond. Um, we continue to make massive investments to get it to the point where it can do better at reasoning and closer and closer to true artificial intelligence, but it's not there yet at all. Like I said, it's
Okay.
more of the best probability of what the answer should be. And this is what blows people away because when they look at it, they're like, "Oh wow, that's really good." That's what I would have selected. But then there are times where it doesn't provide the best answer. So we it, what I always tell everybody is it's not going to replace humans. You need to have that human in the loop to be able to provide the right instructions, provide the right context, and then review the response that you get. And that's where things break down. Like in our particular workflow, where organizations are only seeing 10 to 20% productivity gains and cost savings, that's because the people that are using it don't know what's good, among many other reasons for why they're unable to do it. They can't provide context, they can't provide the right instructions, but when they get something, they don't know if that's actually the most appropriate code that should have been written. So you need to be able to
Okay.
review that and assess the output to determine whether that actually truly meets your needs.
So in the needs of being deterministic, that you're meeting the needs.
Yeah.
What guidance, if any, um, would be beneficial to individuals of being able to analytically and effectively create the metrics that make sure you're on the right path?
Well, in software development, you should use Intelligenic's Product Studio.
Okay.
Shameless plug, right?
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
hey, by the way, is there any details with Product Studio that you want to talk about as far as the selling points to our viewership right now? Tell us what Studio Product can do for the viewership.
yeah, what it will help you do is it will provide you with the appropriate framework to build truly complex applications, right? I think we've only scratched the surface on what artificial intelligence can do for us today. The organizations that have done well know how to use it to provide the context, to provide the right instructions, prompts to get to produce high quality output. And then they know what's high quality output. We're effectively creating a framework that helps them do that. It also brings us back to managing that whole structural process that we've always used in the history of software development. The best software that's been written, it's not when people sit down and just start banging away on keyboards. I don't care what anybody says. There's always structure that's associated with defining what needs to be built, why it needs to be built, and trying to create it at the most atomic level. The challenge
Mm-hmm.
that exists today is that most people, when they try to use these tools, whatever it may be, they're trying to create something grandiose. Like the example I gave of trying to integrate with Bank of America. If you just start there with a prompt like that and don't give any more context, you're not going to get what you need. But if instead you said, I want to create an API and I need it to transfer this kind of data, well, that's getting more atomic in nature. So what our platform does is it helps define everything up front. It goes through all that discovery effort. We create the product requirement definitions. We create the user workflows. We define exactly what goes into each feature. We define all the user stories that need to get executed on to produce code, just like you would if you weren't using artificial intelligence. You're not going to assign somebody a ticket that's go build me an integration solution between two banks. No, you're going to break that down into the most granular atomic level possible. We do that. We create that user story and then we integrate that user story with the platforms you use today, like Jira, to manage your product development process. And then you can assign that to a developer. Then once we've created that ticket and all the other context that went into defining what that ticket is, that user story, we use that to provide to our agentic framework to create the code for that user story. We never create code at the macro product level. It's always done at the most atomic level. And then we integrate all of that together so that you get a truly functional app that will deal with really complex workflows.
It's interesting you say banging at the keyboard. I don't know what your familiarity is with NetNews, if you remember NetNews.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Net news was a character based way you do investigations. It was a precursor to, let's say, search engines. It
Okay.
was you
Hmm.
typed in a command of what you're and provide the string that you were looking for, and you get some information. There was a great story that I'll share with you. You probably get a kick out of. There was a coding project, and there was one guy. He was just doing nothing but banging away at the keyboard. The boss was so impressed as far as his due diligence, hardworking, where the other guy did not get such a high rating because he was spending more time reading stuff, even feet up on the desk. And he was like, I don't think he's going to, I just don't think he's doing the work. Well, when the project deadline came in, the keyboard banger had to spend 3, 4 hours debugging code. Whereas the guy that was sitting at his chair because he was doing the planning and analytics, he only had 2 minutes of code changes and they were good to go with his code.
Yep.
I always loved that story.
Yep. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That so it's that the structure, the specifications, that's not going away. I mean, there's a massive debate right now about it, and I just think that anybody that is professing that is wrong. It's like you need to provide that structure, you need to provide that guidance, you need to provide those specifications, and the more of that you provide, the better the output is. That's where we see the true force multiplication. That's where you're going to see 10x productivity gains. And it's
Okay.
not just a code. It's like helping you build all that context along the way. It shouldn't take you hours, days, or weeks to come up with that specification anymore. You should be interacting with the models to be able to help you create that so that you can get to that next step where you're actually ready to produce the actual ultimate outcome that we're looking for, which is the code itself.
Now, with where we're at, or let's say with your organization with AI, what do you see is in store in the future in working with AI? What major changes will take place?
Well, it won't be optional. Like I talked about before, like if you use an iPhone, you're interacting with it. If you use Google, you're interacting with it, right? That's certainly going to be the case in just about anything that we do. If there is a manual process that could benefit from automating it and it's going to make people more productive in doing that and also focusing on other things, it will be used for that. Um, to make this happen though at scale, there's so many things that we need to be able to do. We need more data centers. I know people are afraid of that. We got all these data centers, but you need it because you need more compute to be able to handle the ability to process this. This is not trivial. We're going to need more power to be able to make that happen. We're going to need to be able to take better advantage of the water that we have at our disposal, right? Those things are not trivial as well. I think that those problems, though, don't get solved by governments. They don't get solved by utilities. They get solved by companies that have demand for their services. You're going to see new innovations in power that are going to come from the likes of Google, from Microsoft, from OpenAI, from Anthropic, from SpaceX. Because they have this need for this resource, you can't wait for the traditional paths, providers to fulfill that. It's going to create new innovation, which means it's going to create new opportunities for people to work in new industries that haven't existed before. And artificial intelligence, it'll be a self-compounding thing. It's just going to help you be more effective at being able to operate in those new industries and whatever form the industry that you're in, whatever shape that it forms as well.
In the Have you worked with Unix and Linux?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're familiar with regular expressions.
Hmm.
Is there a means for regular expressions to be for artificial intelligence to be able to address the complex regular expressions, or is that still a result of human intelligence getting involved?
Uh, Again, if anything that where you can provide the right prompt in the right context, it's going to be able to create content for you, right?
Okay.
I mean, it's just like in same thing you would do in writing code. These things it will be able to address. Whether it's right, that's another thing altogether. It's going to be predicated on the context that you provide and the prompts that are provided, and then your ability to assess whether it's actually truly meeting your needs. That's the key.
Well, yeah, well, the reason why I asked that question is because I think AI could address the simple pattern matching areas. However, if you've seen Jira logs, I used to have to produce reports for the FBI when it came to the Sentinel product, as far as being able to anchor information that I can yank, because a lot of your Jira logs are good eyesores to be able to read the data. And I just didn't. I just, when I look back, I'm not sure if I can create a language manager to be able to have the constructs to be able to do those more complex areas. That's just a thought. I just wanted to run that by you. Now, we're getting towards the tail end of this podcast, and I think there's been a lot of great information. How do you feel?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I've really been enjoying it.
Good. I'm glad you've been enjoying it. So, as we come full circle, I'm going to give you the opportunity to summarize the AI stuff that you're working on, selling your product, and the direction of AI for the future. Back to you.
Yeah, again, with Product Studio, we're creating a framework that's going to automate the software development process from beginning to end, right? So that starts with discovery, where you're determining what you're trying to build, how you're trying to build it, why you're trying to build it, through to design, where you're creating all of the necessary information related to what should be built, through you applying that to producing actual code, to then validating what's been built through testing, and then automating the whole deployment process. Uh, we are creating a framework that will provide the necessary structure and planning to be able to produce those outcomes with minimal iteration, right? Which is the number one challenge that everybody has right now. Is that it takes a lot, costs a lot as far as tokens are concerned, costs a lot as far as compute cycles are concerned, it costs a lot as far as human involvement concerns to get what you need out of it. Our goal is to improve that and make people much more productive in their software development workflow, more than just the engineers. This includes everybody that's involved in the process, from product managers to designers, software engineers, QA engineers, and the DevOps engineers, as well as the people that are managing the initiatives as well. Um, I think the future is bright. I am very much an optimist when it comes to what artificial intelligence can do for humanity. I believe it's going to be the greatest force multiplier we have ever seen, the greatest innovation that we've ever seen, not only for the industry that I'm involved in and the workflow that I'm involved in, but any industry can take advantage of it. And what I would offer to everybody is that if you're not, you should be, and you should be looking into how you can apply it today. And I guarantee you'll find ways to do it. Don't just introduce it. That's the wrong way to go about doing it. You know, do some introspection and analysis of your workflow and determine where there's a lot of human involvement that's highly manual in nature, and try to determine if there's a way that you can automate that. And if you can, and you can describe that process and provide the necessary context that you need to, using certain frameworks, whether that's for software development, for Intelligenic and Product Studio, or something else, then you would be surprised. You're actually going to get a lot of benefit from applying artificial intelligence to make your organization more efficient than you ever possibly could have imagined.
Thank you. Now, what is the website for Intelligenic?
It's intelligenic.ai. So think intelligence and photogenic combined. So it's INTELLIGENIC.ai.
Great, because I encourage the viewers to go visit your website and see all the wonderful stuff that you're working on. No, I can't thank you enough for an outstanding podcast. I think the information you provided to our viewership was outstanding. To our viewership, I'm going to say definitely check out the website, intelligenic.ai, because there's a lot of stuff that you can grab from that. And also, it's studio product, correct?
Product Studio.
I'm dyslexic. Product Studio. Check the Product Studio out because it's probably going to help you uh, make huge gains in developing your software for your organization. Again, Noel, thank you very much for your time. And I think the viewership definitely learned a lot from your expertise and understand why you're an industry leader.
Fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity, Glenn. I really appreciated the time today and the conversation was incredible. My pleasure, for
Yes,
sure.
I agree. Thank you very much.